I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Shh, it's the Film Flamers.
Hi, I'm Chris.
Hi, I'm Robert.
And we're the Film Flamers, bringing you another Top 10. We'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 sci-fi horror movies of all time.
That's right, children. Category is Top 10 Sci-Fi Horror. So let's just jump right into it, Chris. My number 10 is 1993's Fire in the Sky, directed by Robert Lieberman.
I think I saw this.
Oh my God. I'm so shocked right now.
That's about the alien abduction, right?
Yeah, so it's sort of like, it's based on the true story of Travis Walton. He wrote this book in the 70s about like his 5-day abduction by aliens and what happened to him on the ship and all the recovered memories he had from it, right?
Allegedly,
yes.
You said true story, so.
Okay, well, quote unquote, true story. I saw this movie when I was 13 years old in the theater, and I was the only person in the theater watching it because my mom had gone to see something stupid, and I was like, well, I'm going to see this. And I was just completely fucking terrified by the end of this movie. Like, most of the movie is sort of like this procedural crime drama, like what happened to your friend, where is he? And there's lots of flashbacks about what happened to these guys in the woods. And then the last, like, act of this movie is just about what happened to him on that ship, and it's truly frightening. The aliens look frightening. The things they do to him, all the like the probing and blah blah blah, is just scary to me. And I just rewatched it to in anticipation of this top 10 list, and I was just as scared as a grown adult at the end of that movie. I was terrified. If you haven't seen it, guys, it's mostly trash. This movie's like it's got a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes, you know. But it's a lot of fun, and I mean, if you go in not expecting like a masterclass of cinema, then you won't be disappointed because the acting is kind of wah-wah, you know, and the storyline itself is kind of, you know, shitty. But that ending act, terrifying, totally worth it.
Yeah. My number 10 is Paul Verhoeven's anti-fascist masterpiece, Starship Troopers from 1997.
I have seen this movie. So.
I love this movie. It's just so well done and polished and kind of tongue-in-cheek in places. Maybe he didn't do the tongue-in-cheek like obvious enough for some people, I guess. Yeah. Like, because there's like this weird like anti-Starship Troopers thing about how it's making fascism look good, and it's like, no, it's not. Like, it's...
Yeah, I didn't get that.
The message is, yeah, so the opposite. But it's beautiful. It's like, I remember just like popping this in randomly, got the Blu-ray out of nowhere, and all of the like the ships and stuff were done with models, like old school models, but everything else around it is CG. And so like these ships are like breaking in half in this orbit, and everyone's dying or whatever. You can see each individual level, like on the ship as they break apart and stuff, all on fire and stuff. There's a lot of awesome stuff in this film, like technically. And then the music by Basil Polidorus is probably his best, better than RoboCop or anything like that. Like, this is amazing music for this film. Anyway, I really love the technical aspects of this film. I like the message. I don't know why it's so misunderstood, but anyway, it has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen it a handful of times, and mostly when I was younger. You said it came out in 97? I mean, I guess that sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah? I kind of care.
Ahead of its time, man. Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember it being that old. I thought this was a 2000s movie, but I mean, I guess you're right, because mostly what I remember from Starship Troopers is Casper Van Dien, right? And so, like, in my formative teenage gay years, he was quite the staple, so...
Yeah, no, and it was also some of the really groundbreaking special effects with like this hordes of these like insect monsters that are like 10 feet tall that are just, you know, thousands of them coming up over the hill and stuff, and they looked completely photorealistic, and to this day it looks really good. Yeah. You know, with a moving camera. So, you know, they had to like do all of this stuff just like perfectly, you know, with a moving camera like that, and it was really good.
I think I need a rewatch. I think that Paul Verhoeven gets a bad rap for some things, but he's not a terrible director.
What, Showgirls?
Please. Showgirls is one of the best movies ever made.
Upcoming horror movie that we're going to be...
Horror adjacency, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. What's your number 9?
My number 9 is Scanners from 1981, directed by David Cronenberg. Guys, I have to say that after George Romero, David Cronenberg is probably my second favorite horror director. I love every movie he's ever made, and Scanners is so good. It's the story of a group of people who have these like weird telekinetic or, you know, telepath abilities, and the company that's trying to like harness them. And there's so much in this movie that's science fiction-y. at one point, one of these scanners tries to make a telepathic link to a computer to sort of like crash it and things like that. And then when you start to realize how these scanners were created, it delves so much into science fiction, just like a lot of David Cronenberg's movies do. It's classic body horror, but I think the only thing I really need to say about scanners is exploding heads. So if you haven't seen this movie, go check it out. It's got a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, I mean, he's no slouch. It's a fantastic film.
Yeah. My number 9 is 1987's Predator with Carl Weathers. And that other guy, what's his name? Oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold.
Yeah. Arnold. Get to the chopper.
Yeah, that's this movie, right?
Yep, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get to the chopper.
No, but it's of course it's a riff off of Alien. It's the same universe. Of course, maybe that was decided later on, but of course the books were, I think, already kind of circling around or about to be released or something.
Yeah.
For Alien versus Predator and all that stuff. But yeah, Predator, it's straight up horror sci-fi. Like evenly down the middle, in my opinion. Maybe more horror, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is stalking them in the woods, and he's invisible, and he's got all these tools and futuristic weapons at his disposal, and picking off people one by one, and it takes cutthroat grit on Arnold Schwarzenegger's character's part to finally defeat it. So it's a really good film. It stands up. I'm not into whatever they're trying to do these days with Predator, but
I was just about to ask how you feel about the franchise. Because I love the Predator franchise. This new movie gets a lot of shit, but it was so good. It was so much fun. Like, I just enjoyed it.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's check it out. Like, I mean, it's one of those cases where you just
does it have Carl Weathers?
No, it really. I mean, I know. And then Predator 2 had Danny Glover, so I mean, you have like really good actors and things, right? But I mean, Carl Weathers clearly is Academy Award winner. I mean, right? Should be. My number 8 is The Blob, and not the original Steve McQueen's first movie, The Blob. I'm talking the 1988 remake by Chuck Russell.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, this is good. This was a staple in my house, and I don't know why. I think it's because it was on HBO all the time or something when I was younger. So as a little, horror baby, I watched it a lot, and it's really gross and gnarly. It's just amazing, like to see The Blob like gets people.
Sorry, as a horror baby, I was like, The Blob needs changing.
The very first kill in this movie is the Blob eating somebody that you think is going to be a main character, right? And you can see skin dissolving from his face like into bone. It's just like the neatest thing to watch. It's so gross, and I love it. The thing is, I was just like, did I want to call this a sci-fi movie? I mean, it's an alien, right? And it crashes to Earth, and it's just not something that you expect an alien to look like. We're expecting like Little Men or things like the Predator or like, Alien from Aliens, right? Mm-hmm. But this is just a really gross, fun sci-fi horror movie that I watch probably way more often than I should.
Yeah. My number 8 is 2007's Danny Boyle masterpiece, Sunshine.
Oh, so good.
Which we covered, of course, last week for our main film for horror sci-fi. And this is the reason why we're doing this list is because we covered this film. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's interesting for me. I don't want to talk much about this because we already covered it, but Danny Boyle cited 2 other sci-fi horror films as inspirations, which may or may not show up on my list somewhere else.
I thought about putting Sunshine on my list because I was so enamored of it on this viewing. The thing is that, I mean, at this point, I've only seen it 2 times, mm-hmm. right? And both 2 times recently in preparation for the podcast. I know that I'll probably watch this movie again, and I think it might creep up closer to my top 10, but it's not on my list. So, but it was a fantastic movie, and I'm glad that I watched it. My number 7 is a recent film. It's Upgrade.
Yes.
From 2018, directed by Lee Wannell.
We've already talked about this movie before.
I know. Right? We talked about it on our best of 2018 list.
Yep.
And that's because it really was. There are some times when you're watching a movie on the first viewing and you just know by the end of it that it's going to be one of your favorites. It's going to be something that you're going to watch many, many more times. And Upgrade was that for me last year. I watched it just randomly and loved it so much that I had to message Chris right away and say, go watch Upgrade. You can thank me later. And I'm glad that he did. The only movies that I felt the same way about, as I did with watching Upgrade recently that I knew that I would love and love forever were Cabin in the Woods and It Follows. Like, it just doesn't happen to me that often. And so I think this movie is fantastic. It's the perfect blend of so many different genres like horror and comedy and action and crime thriller and drama and sci-fi, and it's just amazing. An amazing, perfect 5-star movie. Plus, Logan Marshall Green is really, really fucking hot. So I just love it.
My number 7 is the 2013 box office bomb directed by Jonathan Glazer called Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson. The music for this movie is amazing. Of course, it's by Mika Levy. Under the Skin was, I thought, a really, really good like psychological horror. I loved all of like the mysterious aspects to it, and I loved the message that it had at the beginning and like the journey that this alien kind of goes on, and is so atmospheric, and there's real tension in it. And I really, really enjoyed this film, and I want to see it again. I've only seen it the one time, but I've listened to the soundtrack probably like 50 times. It's so good.
I have listened to the soundtrack quite a bit. I mean, because you recommended this movie to me after you watched it, and I always trust your opinion. And so I sat down to watch this movie, and it didn't quite get under my skin. In fact, well, I mean, it did maybe in a bad way, because I was just like, fuck this movie, and I turned it off. But I mean, since that time, I really regret that decision. I think I should have saw my way through it and finished the movie, and I'm gonna rewatch it. I just think I might need like a little medicinal help or something. I think that might affect my viewing a little bit, so I'm gonna give it another chance. I want to, but initially I just like couldn't do it. Do you know what its rating is on Rotten Tomatoes?
No.
I know that people love it, you know, but I also know that people either love it or they hate it, right? It's one of those polarizing movies. But if it's as high as number 7 on your list, I'm more than willing to give it a second chance.
Definitely do it.
Yep. My number 6 is another David Cronenberg movie. It's Videodrome from 1983. Videodrome is, quite frankly, I mean, like, one of his best movies. To me, it's like almost a masterpiece in like body horror and sci-fi horror. It's all about like the power of video or television to sort of like take over your mind subliminally and make you act in certain ways. And there's just so much disturbing imagery in this movie. So it's like sex, violence, gross body horror, and like mind controlling video all rolled into one. And it just makes this like a masterpiece of science fiction. It's about this 80s TV producer who's always looking for like the next edgy thing to air. And he comes across this like video feed of a person in like this orange room being tortured, essentially, in almost a sexual manner. And it sort of just devolves from there into these really bonkers places. A lot of it doesn't make sense, but if you've seen the movie as many times as I have, it sort of starts to do that. It's a very sinister feeling. Plus, I mean, like, Debbie Harry's in it, so you can't get any better than that.
Oh my god, really?
If there was a Blondie soundtrack along with it, I might like it a lot better, but the score by Howard Shore in this movie is just so good. I mean, it just, all of it fits and creates the perfect movie to watch.
My number 6 is 2007's The Mist, directed by Frank Darabont, who also did a bunch of other Stephen King adaptations like The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile. So I think he's his Stephen King's favorite. And Stephen King even agreed with the really bleak ending and thought it was an interesting check on his short story for The Mist. And I really love this film. And I even watched like the black and white version that the Blu-ray comes with. It has a whole different version you can watch.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's really, really, really good. So, I mean, I was blown away by this movie. I thought it was going to be a creature feature, and I didn't really understand the context around it. But it's a really good character study. You know, it's really about these characters and the journey that they go on psychologically. And this, you know, when they're just like the mist descends upon them and all these like extra dimensional creatures, like weird, like giant mosquito things and spiders and everything else are attacking them, and they have to survive, like, and like part of their surviving group like joins a cult, and you know, inside it's so weird. And it's like, it seems so weird talking about that, but it actually seems very, very grounded and realistic while it's happening in the film. It's almost like a stage play. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, I remember watching this in the theater, and I was completely immersed in this movie because the acting was phenomenal. When you just said that, I was just like, oh, is that a sci-fi movie? But now that I'm thinking about it, they come from another dimension, right?
They come from like a portal up in the hills, the military base.
Right. It's total sci-fi. You're right. Oh my God, this should be on my list because this movie is phenomenal. God damn it. I didn't even think about that. I think it's safe to say that at some point, guys, we will be covering a full episode on The Mist because I think that Chris and I both enjoyed that movie very much.
So quotable too.
My number
Oh, a
5.
friend like you, I'd squat down and shit one
Oh
out.
my God, Marsha Gay Harden is so good in that movie. Where was her Oscar? This is the only time, I will say this anecdotally, when we saw this movie, I think I was with my mom and like one of her friends, and I drugged them to see it. And when she like dies or whatever, I like clapped out loud, and I never do that shit in a theater. I was just like, yes! So, was that involved. My number 5 is the last David Cronenberg movie on my list. I promise. It's The Fly from 1986.
But it's my number 5.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll just say what I want to say about it quickly.
Fly swatter, make me a man.
This movie is fucking incredible. It's gross. It's insanely rewatchable. I mean, like that burst scene alone is just like amazing.
And we're not saying it's scary, but be afraid. Be very afraid.
It's a timeless line.
And it originates in this film.
I know, and
Gina Davis.
I rewatched it just this week before we're doing this recording, because I hadn't seen it in a couple years, and I was just like, when they got to that line, I was like, I totally forgot that's from this movie. I was like, Gina Davis, look at you with some quotable horror.
Yeah.
So she's, I mean, like,
I remember that was like a scientific kind of edgy horror, like procedural or something, and then like he steps into the diner or whatever and has this like arm wrestle with this dude, and he like rips his arm off. I'm like, oh, that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
And it just descends from there into like this body horror madness.
it is exactly madness. That's the perfect word to describe this movie. This movie's got some problems. I mean, it's not the end all be all of sci-fi horror. The acting is okay.
Brenda Fly.
Yeah. But like the visual effects in this movie are so good. Nominated for an Academy Award. I think they won the Academy Award for this movie. It was just great to look at. And in my opinion, David Cronenberg's best film. It is like his end all be all masterpiece. He will never be able to top what he's done with The Fly. I haven't seen the sequel. Did you see The Fly 2?
No.
Yeah, my biggest fear is that someone's going to want to remake this movie, and I think that if you're not going to use practical effects, it's not going to be as good.
Well, let's remember that The Fly itself is a remake.
Right.
So, just like the next thing on my list, which is my number 4, The Thing from 1986 by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell et al. And I love this movie. We've talked about it several times. I think it's been on our list several times.
Yeah. It's definitely on the remakes list.
Yeah,
Both our
and
number
it's
one.
just such good sci-fi horror and really, really horror and body horror. I mean, seriously, like some of the best effects I've ever seen to this day in some of the makeup effects that they did for this film, special effects, and sequences that are in-camera effects that are just amazing. The story is so tense and very, very tightly wound. It's very taut, I should say.
It is very
Yes.
taut. And now that you said that, again, this is another movie that I didn't think about being science fiction. Whenever I watch The Thing, I never think about it being an alien,
It literally opens with a spaceship crashing
Right.
to Earth.
I mean, my God, I'm so stupid. I cannot believe that I wouldn't even think about that. I mean, you're right. It's science fiction through and through.
Yeah.
My number 4 is The Faculty from 1998, directed by Robert Rodriguez. And this movie gets a lot of shit. Like, people just shit all over it for some
Really?
reason. Yeah, I mean,
I
every
never
time,
heard that. I just heard, who's in The Faculty? It's good.
I mean, every time people talk about it, at least around me, or things that I see on like Twitter or whatnot, I mean, people are like, oh, it's bad. It's a bad movie. And it's got like 53% on Rotten Tomatoes
Really?
or whatever. Yeah. So,
I
I mean,
it has
like,
Elijah Wood, and it has like like what his name is, like Josh Hartnett.
yeah, this
And it's
cast
got
is so 90s.
Jon Stewart randomly.
Yeah, and like Usher's in it, and and BB Newirth is in it. I mean, like it's a great cast, and it's like quintessential '90s horror for
It's
me.
like a who's who of dead careers.
Aww.
No, Robert Rodriguez just did Battle Angel Alita or whatever, and which I really, really enjoyed.
I still haven't seen that
which is
either.
really good. Has definite horror elements in that one, but no, it's a I've yet to see The Faculty.
You haven't seen The Faculty?
No.
Oh my God, I watch it at least like once a year. I love it so much.
Yeah.
It's like a great '90s cast. I still have the CD of the soundtrack.
Right up my alley too, but I was probably in Germany at the time when it came out because I watched all the like I know what you did last summer and Scream and all that stuff before I left, but like I went into like movie black hole when I was in Germany.
Oh,
and,
that's
like,
sad.
TV.
I think you would like it, actually. Yeah. It's a good movie. We should watch it together. So maybe I'll save my viewing this year for when you're around.
My number 3 is Aliens from 1986 by James Cameron. Shut up.
Sorry.
He's my favorite director. I couldn't remember his name for just like half a second. I don't know what I'm on right now. This movie is amazing. It's one of my favorite movies, probably in my top 10 of all time, of any kind of movie, regardless of genre. Anything from like the production value to the script to like the acting, the creature effects, the music, if I didn't already mention that. Everything is just top tier, and it like shifts the genre from just like suspense thriller to action horror sci-fi, and did its own thing. Like, it didn't try and copy. A lot of sequels just try and capitalize on popularity or whatever. He did his own thing here, and it is still one of the best action movies, period, one of the best sci-fi movies, period, and one of the best horror movies, period, in my opinion. And I feel like a lot of people agree with me, and it was nominated for Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And it kind of is also kind of a success story, because the entire crew basically like left the set and stuff because they did not think James Cameron was a director. He had never filmed anything in England before, and so he wasn't used to like tea times and all these breaks and everything else, and they didn't know what he'd done. And he tried to pass out copies of The Terminator, which he had done previously, and no one would watch it. And so like he had to get people like the business to come in and like get people back on set because he wasn't having the tea times and all that, and they were just like, this is a young director that doesn't know what he's doing. We don't like he's making his own shots like George Lucas style. We don't do that. Cinematographers make all these decisions. DPs make these decisions. Cameron was making all of these, creative decisions that they weren't used to. He was stepping on a lot of shoes. And they're like, this is going to be, no one wants to put their name on this or whatever. And it came out, everyone was blown the fuck away.
Well, it made a shit ton of money. I know that.
It was up for Academy Awards and everything. And James Cameron was just like, you should have trusted me,
It is a good movie. I think as far as like James Cameron's film, I mean, like, this is probably my favorite of his.
Yeah.
So,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a very long time, actually. I mean, I need to rewatch it too.
Yeah.
My number 3 is another remake. It's Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978, directed by Philip Kaufman. Yeah, exactly. He's doing it. The mouth agape, finger point. This movie has been made so many times, and I really like every iteration of it. Like, even the really bad one with Nicole Kidman, right? Like, it's just a really good story. And while the original is great, I think that this particular version is by far the best. It's the scariest. It's the most... I think it's got the most horror cred to it. And the cast of this movie is fantastic. So there's so much horror cred in here, like Donald Sutherland from Don't Look Now, Veronica Cartwright from things like Alien, right? Jeff Goldblum is in this movie. Leonard Nimoy is in this movie.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. He's in it right alongside Donald Sutherland.
So, I mean, it is just a truly, truly frightening movie. And the image of Donald Sutherland, mouth agape, finger pointing at Veronica Cartwright will be forever seared into my brain.
Wasn't there another remake of this called like with Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig or something?
Yeah, that's what I just said a little bit ago. I think it's called The Invasion or something like that.
You mentioned it?
Yeah. That's what I said. I was like, I like every iteration, even the bad one with Nicole Kidman.
That must have been when I was looking at my clock and it said 3:45 and I was like, it's almost 4 hours away till Game of Thrones.
Your countdown. Yeah, it's truly, truly frightening. Another version of this was from the 90s called Body Snatchers with Gabrielle Anwar, right, or whatever. And it's just like, there's just so many different versions, but this one is tops. If you have not seen this movie, please do yourself a favor and go out and watch it.
My number 2 is Alien from 1979 by Ridley Scott. And of course, this is one of those films that was cited as an influence on Sunshine, as we mentioned earlier.
That's right.
And of course, nothing beats Alien for suspense terror. So, I mean, if you haven't seen Alien, my God, do yourself a favor and watch it.
Clearly.
I mean, it's so iconic. You can't not see this film.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you're talking about it now because my number 2 is also Alien.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, Alien is definitely in my top favorite movies of all time. I mean, I'm not just talking about horror.
Yeah, it's probably my top 10 as well.
Yeah, I think Alien is just a complete masterpiece. This movie has been a part of my life since before I was even born. My mother's favorite horror movie story to tell me is her watching Alien in August of 1979 while she was 8 months pregnant with me, and just like the watching things burst out of chests and and stomachs on screen while she was that pregnant. She was like, I was so uncomfortable and terrified. And so, like, she showed me this movie at a very young age. She was like, you need to watch this because you traumatized me and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's my fault. And so I've just seen it so many times ever since. So I always associate this movie with my mother. And
wow.
like that.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I know. Isn't that bad? So, but it's terrifying, man. And Sigourney fucking
Get
Weaver.
away from her, you bitch. Wait, that's the last movie.
That's from Aliens. Sigourney Weaver is so good in this entire franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, I just love her. Love it.
You didn't say her name right, though.
I wrote it right here on my notes, so it says Sigourney fucking Weaver.
That's correct.
All right, we're down to our number ones. Chris, do you want to go first? You want me to go?
You go.
Okay, my number one is They Live from 1988, directed by John Carpenter. It is the best science fiction horror movie ever created.
Wow.
I have to stand by that. I have seen this movie upwards into the 20s or 30s amounts of times. I just have seen this movie so much. I had a VHS copy. I've had a DVD copy, a Blu-ray copy. I think I even had a Laserdisc like back in the day.
I love how you get on to me for watching like Lord of the Rings like 6 times and yet you've seen a movie 30 times.
Well, the difference is that They Live is like 80 minutes long as opposed to like 400,000 minutes long, you know? So,
that might be an embellishment.
I mean, I could easily watch
Just
They
because the
Live.
whole extended edition is 13 hours.
So, I mean, this is a quick movie and it's fun. I mean, it's got Roddy Piper in it, for God's sakes. I mean, but also, I mean, as
Piper Laurie?
Yeah, that'd be great too. As fun as it is, it's got a really cool like message about, you know, consumerism and government and like Big Brother type ideas. I mean, it's just a really great movie. And in my opinion, John Carpenter's best film.
Oh, wow. I've never seen it. Like, I've always meant to.
It's so good. Again, this is one of those.
Yeah,
maybe we'll do like a Faculty.
One of those huge
and They
movies
Live
that's just,
double feature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just like slipped under my radar. I've seen clips. I know what it's about. Like, I know some quotes. Like, yeah.
While I'm very sure you'll love The Faculty, I'm sort of iffy as to what you'll think about They Live. Like, I know that you'll ultimately like it, but I mean, I think you might find some parts problematic. I think it's like 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not. Okay. It's well remembered, and if not, I don't think it was well received at the time.
Yeah.
So.
My number one is, in my opinion, the best or at least the most iconic horror sci-fi, even if it's not viewed as such, of all time, which is Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968. And a lot of people's minds are blown when you say it's 1968 because the effects, you know, without this movie and without the effects and the groundbreaking stuff that they did, like Star Wars wouldn't have happened, things like that, right? As far as a technical standpoint. But Kubrick and, Kubrick partnered with Arthur C. Clarke to basically pen this movie, you know, and have something to say about human evolution and the nature of mankind and our journey as a species in a way. And people often also forget that this is probably one of the first movies where AI or, artificial intelligence is a bad guy or starts kind of integrating that paranoia into society, and maybe the first. With Hal, of course. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. You know, and but they also forget. Like, the beginning kind of throws people off because it's like starts with human evolution, like as monkeys or whatever, or monkey adjacent or whatever you want to say. I'm not a scientist. And at the end, it kind of goes into like the surrealist kind of area where it goes into like a lot of like going through a wormhole, a lot of visuals, you know, and then a lot of symbolism visual, and then you see like the space baby approaching Earth, you know. So it kind of goes off into like really symbolic territory, but those things are bookending this horror movie where these astronauts are having to contend with like the pinnacle of their creation, the height of their current evolution, you know, which is this AI, HAL, which is driving the ship and kind of making everything run and everything. So at the beginning of the film, you witness this monolith at early humans, right? And just from seeing this monolith, they're picking up a bone and finding out that they can use it as a tool. And just from them doing that, that leads all the way to space travel. Just from them learning how to use a tool, that's what it leads to. So what is the monolith doing now when people look at it at this stage in human evolution? Where does it bring us to next? What is the next leap? And that's what the film is trying to kind of portray in symbolism of the next. What's the lesson we have to learn? Things like that. And you'll see kind of echoes of that in Sunshine a little bit and a lot of other films that were influenced by it. And you can almost not beat the symmetry and like sheer beauty and balance on the screen as Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. And of course the music is amazing and everything's working for it. It's just, you have to be very patient with this film. Like there's an hour that could be cut out of this just from just like watching people float across the screen.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, I mean, I've only seen this movie one time and I can't remember exactly when. It was between the ages of like 12 and 15, right?
Yeah.
When I was like really starting to like appreciate, movies as art. And so I wanted to find things that people considered to be one of the greatest movies of all time. And I actively sought them out and I rented and watched this movie. And I mean, for my age, right? I mean, I wouldn't say that, I mean, I'm not a stupid person, but I was just like, I don't know what's going on. There's so much like artistic symbolism and stuff like that. But I remember being completely engrossed in that middle half of the movie. I think that Hal is like one of the scariest villains.
So that's a whole thing, and it's been riffed off of many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
But the film is also ahead of itself. Like Arthur C. Clarke famously wrote in scientific journals and is basically one of the fathers of our modern satellites, and he's a science fiction writer. So he and Kubrick, who is like inventing new things for the screen, right, teamed up for this movie. And there's things in this movie that are around today that have never been seen in reality, in writing, or on screen before. And it's like credit cards, widescreen, the concept of a widescreen TV and stuff. Like all of these different things were done on the screen that are just very casual, that you notice, and that are just part of the film. They make it very grounded, like in its own little world. And so, I don't know, there's just a lot to mine there, visually and otherwise.
I really think I need to rewatch this movie just because, I mean, the amount of like space between the last viewing and now, obviously I'm an adult, I've changed, I've learned a lot, and I think I would take a lot more from it than I did as an early preteen or whatever. So, I mean, it's definitely something that I need to rewatch because I think I would appreciate it probably a lot more than I did then.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple runners up. Can I go through these movies that almost made my list?
Oh, sure. Me too.
So I really enjoy Tobe Hooper's remake of Invaders from Mars. This is another like 1980s horror sci-fi movie, right?
Yeah.
And only because I liked it so much when I was a kid, like I haven't watched it in many, many years, but I remember loving it. I also like Firestarter a lot. And the only reason I didn't put that on my list is because I didn't think that I could squarely call it science fiction. It has to do with like telekinetic powers or whatever, like superhuman powers that are given to you via drug by the government, essentially, right? And so one little girl can create fire with her mind. And I was just like, oh, it's kind of sci-fi because of all the government stuff, the shop or whatever they call it. I was like, but I could not stand by calling it science fiction enough to put it on the list. But if I could make a valid argument, I would have included it in my top 10. It was that close. But I think the one that was the most close to cracking the top 10 was Event Horizon. So, I really struggled as to not putting that on my list.
Sure.
Because that movie came out of nowhere to me. Like I randomly watched it on video, and it came out when I was working in a video store when I was a teenager, and I rented it and watched it. And I wasn't expecting it to be as horrific as it is, right? It really is just like Hellraiser in space.
When it came out, I had viewed it as like, well, there already is a Hellraiser in space movie.
Is it really?
Yes, it was like Hellraiser 4 or something. It was good.
Oh, I stopped watching it.
It goes through different points in history. It goes through like when the puzzle box was created, and then it goes to like a middle part, and then it goes to the future, and they're fighting him in all three time periods.
Oh, I really need to start watching those movies.
And it was actually pretty good. It was surprising, actually, for what it was. But no, Event Horizon, when I saw that in 1997, like, I was like, this is the closest thing that I'll probably ever get to like Season of Passage as a,
I like that book a lot too. Yeah. So.
As far as like the space portion of it or whatever. Mm-hmm. And no, it was cool. I just wish that they had brought it together a little bit more as like a physical entity or something, because it was very nebulous or something. But no, I'm a huge fan of Event Horizon. I think they do a great job. Like the whole inside of the ship was designed after like the Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. We're going to have to cover that someday.
So, I mean, how close was that to being on your list? Was it one of your runners up?
Yeah, I have Event Horizon, I have Species, Resident Evil, Attack the Block, Critters, Cube, Pitch Black, and 10 Cloverfield Lane as my runners up. I had a lot. Like, I had to really whittle this down. And I also wrote down stuff like Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because those are technically sci-fi, right? Like, the scientist is, like, using science to, like, bring things together. But I feel like that's more body horror, straight horror. But maybe that's just what we've accepted it to be now. Because technically you could argue that it's science fiction horror.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of argument when it comes to David Cronenberg's work as to whether or not that's just straight body horror or straight horror. But I think that he adds a lot of sci-fi elements into his films that, squarely put them in this particular, subgenre. That list is pretty impressive, though. Like, I totally forgot about Species. Like, that was a good movie.
Yeah.
I've never seen Attack the Block. I really, really want to. I hear
Have you
it's
seen
great.
Cube?
I have seen Cube. I don't like Cube.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
It's like I don't. I've seen
watch
it a
it?
couple times.
Oh, a
I'm
couple
just like,
times.
yeah,
Wow.
I'm not a fan at all.
Have you seen Cube?
No. After that first one, I was like, I'm not watching any more of these movies.
Yeah.
There's something else that you just said that I was just like, oh yeah, that was a really good movie too. I know I can't remember.
It's okay.
But anyway, good list. This is good runners up.
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously, we probably have enough movies to do another top 10 of this particular
Yeah, there's a lot of good horror
category.
sci-fis, really.
Yeah, I mean, and I was surprised at, I had a whole list. I think that I had to whittle down to 10 from like 35 movies is what I listed.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well, it's just really lucky because, like, there's a lot of horror fans that disdain sci-fi or look down on it, and there's a lot of sci-fi fans that look down on horror, or a lot of other people that just like look down on both.
that's right. Yeah.
So it's really interesting when you got like a cross between both there's just a shit ton of really good examples of movies that are just amazing sci-fi horrors. So I would say, like, let's all hold hands.
That's right. Sing a little kumbaya and just like
watch
get together on
some
this.
fucking horror movies. So yeah.
Good. I love it. Okay, guys. Well, that was our top 10 picks for sci-fi horror. Let us know what you think. What movies are on your top 10 list, or which sci-fi horror movies do you love the most? You can tell us on social media at The Film Flamers on Twitter or Facebook.
Or you can call us on our hotline at 972-666-7733. Or you can email us at
tiredqueens@filmflamers.com. I almost never say that, so I had to think for a minute. Also, guys, head over to patreon.com/thefilmflamers and check out all of our bonus content. You could have gotten this episode maybe weeks in advance of its actual release date, not to mention all the other bonus episodes that we've put out there for you. You can get that all for as little as $2. Guys, next month is June. It's Pride Month, and we have a lot of stuff coming out for you, so stay tuned for that. We'll be covering Stranger by the Lake as our main feature film presentation. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's going to be the first viewing for both me and Chris.
Yeah, and I
we're
believe
very
it's
excited.
available on Amazon, and we'll have a link in the show notes just for you.
That's right. Well, until next month, guys.
Sweet dreams.